All right. Hey, Freddie. Good to see you again. Yeah, cool. That was a really rich conversation and a lot of threads that I want to tease out of that. But the first that I thought was the most interesting is about being human. You're a human, Freddie. We just talked a lot about work, and I wondered if maybe introduce a little bit. When we spoke last week on a Zoom, and I'd seen Freddie on another Zoom on the web somewhere, and there's a picture of bike racers on the wall. There's a bike frame on the wall. It's very clear immediately that there's a real passion for biking for Freddie. So I thought maybe we might talk a little bit about that as well. Yeah.
I'm more than happy to talk about that. I always joke that cycling is the one thing that keeps me going outside of work. I joke with my teams that I sit at work all day looking at data and numbers, and I go home and I look at all my workout data and stare at that numbers. And I guess pretty boring, but. Yeah, and let's talk about, I'm happy to talk about cycling. It'll be a change to how AI is doing in the world.
Well, I had mentioned I just finished like a 30-mile mountain bike race up in northern Michigan. I thought that was pretty impressive. And then Freddie told me about a race in South Africa that he had been in. So as a tee-up for this, I thought maybe some of the lessons that you've learned on a bike and how they kind of tie back into your experience.
It's fun because I was talking about it. So there's a race called the Cape Epic. And if you're a mountain biker, you might know it's a 7-day mountain bike race across South Africa. And I did this in March, and you do it as a teammate, and it's an epic experience and unbelievable. But the bit I didn't actually talk about with Kris is I didn't finish it when I did it in March. I didn't actually get to the end. I actually managed to get kidney failure and end up in an ambulance and a trip home in an ambulance, which was quite entertaining. And riding an ambulance down a mountain bike trail, not much fun. I was bumping down there with a broken arm. I didn't actually have a broken arm. The guy next to me had a broken arm, and I just was delirious. And so it was an amazing experience, and I'll just to connect that to kind of work and life. So I think to me it was one, just the fun of doing it, but two, just getting to push myself to that extra limit and just seeing how far your body will go. It's amazing how much you can do. It's a really, really cool experience. I don't recommend getting kidney failure and ending up in hospital and dialysis and all that. It's just not much fun.
In a foreign country.
In a foreign country. The medical services in South Africa, brilliant. Really recommend if you have to. But no, it was a really cool experience.
So in one sense, you failed.
Yeah.
You didn't finish.
Mm-hmm.
How would you kind of tie that back into how you guys think about work, right? Because there's this idea of we can't fail, or like the fear of failure versus just kind of embracing the learnings of it.
Yeah.
Growth mindset.
No, a growth mindset. Yeah, 100%. And I think I answered the one upsy question. And one, there's a lot of failure, right, in work and in housing, as we mentioned earlier. Like that I can give you lists of things we got wrong as we did it. I mean, lists and lists. I don't think we dwell on them too often, but yeah, 100%. And I can connect. I talked about the resourcing conversation. I can tell you that the finance situation of when you in-house is a really interesting one to work through and make sure you understand how do you get a computer company to buy advertising. That's a battle. When I always joke about when HP turned to me and said, the HP procurement finance team said, "Can you go negotiate with Google? We want to change the payment terms." And I looked at them, "You want me to go negotiate with Google on payment terms? I'm not going to win this one." Yeah, but we're HP. Yeah, you're HP. Like, we're not that big. It was quite a good laugh, and we've not just Google, it's through a few. So yeah, it's definitely.
So there's a lot of like on-the-job learning and things that you just. I would imagine you're like, well, I've been through some really hard things in other circumstances, so how much harder can this be than being carted off a course like that?
Exactly. And I have completed a few bike races too, just for the record. I think
just like a 7-day cross-country. That's pretty intense. Well, you guys touched on a lot of things that I think are interesting threads to continue kind of pulling on a little bit the psychology of things and really thinking about whether aside, how do you sell printers and copies? How do you make people care about that? And it really kind of tapped into this idea of emotion. So how do you think about that from a creative perspective?
Yeah. So I mean, this was when Kris and we were chatting earlier. It's like I'll talk about printers. Like, they're not necessarily I have to be careful because it is broadcasted, but they're not the sexiest things in the world, right? Like, you don't get super excited. I joke that no one jumps out of bed in the morning and goes, "God, I can't wait to use my printer today." And so you kind of like think about that, and you think of it becomes a utility, and same with the PC and the laptop and so on. So it's about creating an emotional connection that makes it a fun and memorable experience. And that, and we talked a lot about fun in our advertising, and fun to me doesn't necessarily mean hilarious or humidity. It can mean just being relevant and so forth, but it has to be, it has to connect with the individual. And so for me, that's really, really important. So yeah, I mean that to me is the creative strategy, and that's then links into how our media operates and how we play with it.
Yeah, there's a really interesting parallel there, that old adage of you're not selling the drill bit, you're selling the hole that it makes. And then Seth Godin expands on that and says it's actually about the shelf that you hang where that hole is, and it's actually not about the shelf, it's the picture frame, but at the end of it, it's the feeling that I get when I look at that sense of accomplishment, my pride there. So
yeah, and I look often, and I feel like you can, a good media strategy can make good creative better. A good media strategy can't make bad creative good. And so for me, so for me, that's really, really important.
yeah, that's interesting. And then, well, you talked a little bit about Wrexham, and I think the content piece is really interesting too, because there's the immediate payoff and the tantalizing idea that, boy, we can measure all this, it's going to tell us exactly what's happening, versus building that long-term.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big thing for HP. I think you can see that actually just in the PC industry quite a lot, where we all, and the printing industry, where we had a good COVID. I don't like saying that, but like it was good for the PC industry in general, right? And the printer industry. And then we came out of that, and suddenly we had supply, and then the demand dropped and so forth. And so we went into a really low focus on demand capture, DR, let's move units. And you can see how much it's actually hurt people's brands as you've done that. And I won't even just talk about HP, I can see that in other bases around where we've really missed it. So I think that is, with the Wrexham piece, with the Real Madrid deal, the recent Ferrari stuff, and Claire talked a lot about what Lenovo's done, like how important that brand connection piece is to continue to bring that conversation in, especially in commercial marketing, which we do a ton of, right? And talking to commercial businesses, it is all about that.
Vizio had a really good COVID as well, so it's okay to say, right? People are stuck at home. But there's that yo-yo effect. It feels like we kind of chase something and then kind of bring it back and dial it back. So the content piece was interesting because we talked about just video and how different video has become these days. It's kind of everywhere.
It is everywhere. Video is everywhere. Attention is dropping, right? We go to the attention world, right? Like we know there's a social media partner, I won't name them, that the presentation to me where they showed that the average consumer on their site is on there for 90 minutes a day and consumes 1,200 videos. You might guess which one it is. You think about that, and you think about attention, and you think about trying to break through, and you're talking about the conversation. Like that to me is a real challenge and a real battle that is going on.
Well, the attention piece, and you turned me on to the work of Dr. Karen Nelson Field, and this idea of passive attention versus active attention. And I think that's a really interesting one to kind of dial into a little bit, because it speaks to what you and John were talking about.
Yeah, it does. Very much what John and I were talking about, and I was depending on how much to open up in the last one, because I knew he was going to ask me about attention. Like this whole idea of passive versus active attention, and that passive attention actually holds the brand for longer, and in the mindset that this was all these studies done. And so we've spent a lot of time looking at things like brand sponsorships, like brand media, to push into the passive attention mentality, to get people to engage and follow it versus chasing the active follow. Not that active attention is bad either. Like things like cinema, out of home, CTV, TV, where you're not necessarily like actively scrolling through, but we know it's actually breaking through just as much. It's really, really powerful. And so we're spending a lot of time kind of looking at how we change our media strategies to deal with it.
Yeah, and media a lot of times, certainly within the CTV and the Vizio world, because I was showing you the Vizio TV behind me, and that's where you mentioned, like, oh, that really reminds me of the passive attention, which is, media tends to think of active attention as somebody is actually watching my commercial and really paying attention to what's happening. So that's the theory anyways.
Yeah.
Versus the passive attention. And so when we turn our TVs on now, we know that 60% of all Vizio owners are streaming exclusively. And probably everybody in this room has had the experience where they turn the TV on and they don't know what they want to watch, and you end up just kind of scrolling and scrolling. And so Freddie very astutely kind of said, oh, we saw a couple brands that had popped up on the home screen now. And in a way that a lot of media traditional investment buyers are like, well, that's not a 15 or a 30, so I can't really show it there. It's just a logo.
Yeah.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah.
But you spoke to the neuroscience, I think, a little bit of
a logo and yeah. I mean, the other study we did that connects very closely to this, like, and the average person when they look at a display banner looks at it for less than 2 seconds, right? And that's not talking about viewability and the ad being visible. That's actually looking at the eyeball and seeing how many times they spend looking at it. Mobile was less than half a second, right? And then we spend all this time building this long conversation, this credit, and so forth. What can you remember in 2 seconds? You can probably remember a logo. And so we think a lot about that, like on what you're actually trying to tell the story. Don't get me wrong, we still have battle with creative teams all the time, and we still have our 60-second long stories and our I shouldn't say movies, but I feel like they kind of are sometimes. But we know that time is so short, we have to really break through.
Well, we really discount like kind of the the psychology of it. That's what you guys tapped into. It was kind of getting really interesting, which is, well, certainly for a brand like HP that has been around for a little while. And that study we should mention too is, passive attention was really effective for brands that already had a lot of brand equity, that I don't need to know what it's about, but it just triggers something. And then to John's point earlier, when they are in the market, that's when you hope that it kind of resurfaces.
Yeah.
So it's just a really interesting piece to dig into. But you also mentioned something when we were talking just about how fractured our attention has become.
Yes.
Something about 2,000 commercial or 2,000 ads over 10 different platforms over a month, which seemed light to me actually. I was like, you said that a day. I would believe it.
Yeah, no, I can't remember where I read it, but there's 2,000 ads seen a day or something, and you just put that into your head and you're like, and you're trying to break through with HP in a printer or HP in a PC, like that's work. Like you need to make something fun with the creative, you need to put it in the right location. When people are saying that, there's no better example than walking down the strip, right? When you think about ads, like the number of ads that you see in like a 10-foot radius or 10-foot steps when you walk out your door of your hotel. I was just looking at the HP signage that we've got up, and I'm just like, how is that breaking through? So like, yeah, it's okay, but like, the creative team did a good job, but it's still like, how does that break through? So yeah, no, we would. It's definitely, again, it comes back to it, and then it comes back then to for me when I talk to my teams and just kind of connecting to 2,000 ads. Like I really focus working with my teams on like they should be proud of every single impression they serve, and that for me works across so many things because it works on your out-of-home billboard on the strip, but it also works when you're buying your retargeting display banner. Because if you don't know where that's landing, how can you be proud of it? And so for me, that's so critical and so important, is to be proud of every single impression. And it's really interesting watching, especially the programmatics and the search teams that are so used to algorithmic optimization, suddenly having to think about, where is this serving? And then that also then connects back. Sorry, this is a bit of a rant, but like, for me, it's like this connects back to the conversation we were just having around the human on the other end of the device or the ad, right? And the feelings here. So to me, that is just so critical to how, for me personally, and how HP shows up in the ecosystem, is it needs every single impression needs to be relevant and thought through. I won't say right time, right place. That is so 10 years ago, I guess. But I do think that it is so critical to think about that impression.
It's a lofty goal, but it's a worthwhile one.
It is, and I'll be honest. I've had the same goal for my team. I think they're probably fed up with it for the last 5 years. My goal, the team's goal, or one of the goals of the organization, is to plan and buy good media, which they hate, and it's just you have to be proud of every single impression, and that's it. And I say it every year, and every year I tell them we failed, because I think we can always do better at it.
Well, pride taps into an emotion too, right? And that's an interesting thing that kind of give people that charge. It's a little bit of like get off of autopilot and just kind of go through the numbers and actually really think about what pride means to you. So does that come up in conversations internally?
It does. It does come up in conversations, and the pride of it. Like, I mean, I love it when everyone sends out emails internally going, "Oh, I saw this ad here. I saw that," and they're proud of what they just did. The one around the area right now is like the whole of HP is centered around to each other, which is really cool. It's like they're proud of it. I would love to see us send out a 300 by 250 and send it around and say I'm proud of that one too at some point, but it hasn't happened. But yeah, no, exactly. And then and then you also get the ethos too when something goes wrong and everyone is feeling it, right? Like when there's a brand safety issue, or you get caught running where you don't want to be, or something happens, and sadly those do still happen in the world today. Like people actively feel they need to fix that.
Yeah. And you also tap into kind of like values. Do you guys talk about values internally, like as a team like that? Pride certainly would be one of them, but like, and it's okay to fall short of them, but when you look at it and say, remind ourselves that this is what our goal is.
I won't go down the HP values and all of that conversation, don't worry. But yeah, no, we do. We talk about values a lot. So, and again, just being proud of what you're doing.
Yeah. So you worked at an agency prior to coming in, and one of the things, at least from the outside looking in, right, is like having everything in-house gives you so much more control. I feel like you're getting a lot more direct conversations. There's a lot. So maybe speak a little bit about the difference and the benefits of having that in-house and being able to really, it sounds like, what we're talking about, long-term equity, bringing in risk, and seeing the value of content and not an immediate payoff from a metric or something being measured.
So we have six goals why we in-housed that we measure ourselves on. And I can go through all six of them pretty quickly. So one is like, the easy ones are agility, speed to market, sure. Data control, we want to control our data, easy. Then you go into things like performance and just being able to optimize media. And I talk about often that when we in-house media, we saw we were able to put $70 million worth of ads that were non-viewable back into being viewable, just in 1 year, right? Like that's $70 million worth of value. That's a lot of money. A bit of cash in the pocket. And then, so that's like performance. So agility, data, performance, transparency, right? Understanding what you're buying and so forth. But then the last two are the two that I think are the most valuable, actually, which is funny, which is I call it HP centricity and partnership. And HP centricity is that you succeed if HP succeeds, and you fail if HP fails, right? The media team is completely, not just from a salary and a bonus perspective, but feels the benefits of the team winning and the team losing. And then the other one is the partnership, which sounds kind of funny now in this post-COVID world and hybrid world, but sitting next to the marketer is so valuable. It was like instant. I could watch the marketing team and the media team change when the media team was still sitting there at 9 p.m. at night, and the marketing team had gone home, and the media team was still writing that media plan for the next morning. And the change in relationship was fantastic. So those are the 6 reasons we in-housed. The 7th that I put in the bottom corner is the savings. I don't like to talk about that one. And that's actually, if you talk about overseas, and that's something I learned from the in-housing, was I would have been a lot more careful sharing the saving numbers with our organization, because you can in-house and you can save money, and you look like a hero. Everyone's so excited about it at the brand, you're saving money. But at the 5th year, when they come back and ask for it again, you're like, I've already in-housed, it doesn't work. You kind of run out of stuff. And then you start to look for things, where can I find more money to save? And it gets really ugly, and it's not a pretty place. So that would be a really big learning for me. Again, I'm giving you guys a ton of, mistakes I've made that I don't know how to fix. I don't know how to fix that one either. But it's definitely important.
Vulnerability is a superpower, that's what Freddie said. And I also hear like the collaboration. That piece sounds like it's really fundamental to.
It is. It's fantastic, and it's been really interesting to watch the way things have changed. And I can give you the examples, like our China team, or the China media team. We in-house there, and it's all of the stuff is e-commerce, and it's like sitting there, and they are trading through the night during 11/11 Singles Day, which is huge. They sit there overnight trading with the marketing team, and the partnership and things. And we've seen massive. I won't quote the numbers, but the performance lift from doing that is incredible. That we've been able to build.
Yeah, that's interesting also, because you have this idea of like the cross-pollination of ideas, things that work in different markets. Is there anything that's kind of come up in those markets that have, or other markets that have translated, or been like, oh, let's throw that against the wall and see?
Yeah, I mean, and this is controversial. I always used to think, when I lived in England, so I feel like I can say this, the US was always first with media ideas, then it would fly to Europe, and then it would go to Asia. That was always my mentality. UK, Europe was like a year behind, and then Asia was a little behind that. And then I moved to the US, and I was like, there's some really interesting stuff coming out of China, some stuff coming out of Europe that the US hasn't got, and it's kind of like it's all over the place. Like social selling coming out of Asia, like I'm fascinated to watch and see if the US ever works that out. Like, will the US consumer ever work out, or not work out, sorry, will the US consumer ever see social as a place to go and purchase big products? I think beauty or cosmetic, I think it makes sense, and some of kind of smaller purchases, but like big, like a laptop, where you go do that in social. I think that'd be really interesting to watch. So like coming out of Asia, some of the anti-US tech coming out of Europe with media is also really fascinating, and creating some interesting dynamics in that market, which I think is going to be really interesting to watch, especially when you see some of the DOJ stuff, and I won't get too political and talk about that right now, but like you see some of that stuff coming out like today and so forth. So yeah, I think there's fascinating things coming out from all over the world that different people are doing. We still run like tons of print newspaper articles in India, and it works brilliant.
Is that right? Is there a thriving print still there?
Yeah, that's like 30% of our media. It's incredible.
Something about like reading the news once at the beginning of the day and then not kind of consuming it all day long on your phone.
No, yeah,
Sounds kind of nice.
Yeah, it does sound lovely.
That's interesting. Well, you talked a little bit about, it's about 5 minutes left, so well, the last piece just on the data piece, and it was interesting that thing you said about only 6% reach those decision makers, so it sounds like a little bit of a kind of yo-yo back away from third party, and you're familiar a little bit with like ACR data, so I wondered if what people are watching is something that, is that you're familiar with ACR and how that works, but I don't know, just maybe riff on that a little bit if that's a source that...
Yeah, I actually love so ACR, or automatic content recognition. Actually, I remember learning about it like 10 years ago. I think it was Summer TV found it. It was Inkscape. It was one of you guys. I can't remember.
Inkscape.
The very beginning, and I remember thinking, that's so cool. That's fascinating information. And then there was some other people trying to do different things with like sniffing audio and things like that. And I think it's a really interesting piece of technology. And that for me is if you can do that credibly through email-based matching, and you can do it with confidence, and then you don't add in like the too hyper-targeted creeping factor on top of it, like Freddie, you just watched the Las Vegas Grand Prix. You should, I don't know, buy an HP laptop. Like that's weird. Probably not very good. That's why I'm not creative, guys. But they're like. Yeah, I think like the data is really good, and if we can use it to build good personas, then I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's just like bringing different signals in. So this idea that we used to buy, young women only watch Bravo. Or if I want to reach women, but they also watch. There's very surprising things, right? It's like we contain multitudes, so it's like the idea that we're all doing one thing. So maybe taking different signals, putting them together, and seeing what you get out of it.
Yeah, and actually, and then the other thing I like on the ACR, just in the sponsorship realm, just connecting that together is pretty interesting. Like being able to connect some of those conversations down. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, one of the most interesting things as it relates to TV is, we still call the things that we carry around in our pockets phones, when their utility is obviously exponentially more than making and receiving phone calls. So the thing on your wall is probably going to be called a TV for the foreseeable future. But what's possible now that that's connected to the internet and the signals that we have of what people are watching and just being, and that's where the AI piece comes in. We said AI, so just to check the box, right? How do we like potentially look at all that? So is there on the television glass, I guess is a way to kind of set us off. Is there a thing that you're thinking about bringing those signals together?
It's still the biggest screen in the household. And that's probably where I'd leave it, right? It's the biggest screen in the household. If you're trying to capture someone's attention, it is the easiest and biggest place you can put some piece of content on there. Can you get someone to put their eye and watch it? That's your battle. But I think it's still the biggest piece of content that people will sit there and watch. I do think that it'll be interesting to watch over the next few years with generations, if that stays the case, but I think for now it's still the biggest screen.
To whoever's made a point earlier about YouTube, I believe that is the one of the most number one streaming apps on the television. I have a 14-year-old and two 12-year-olds, and that is TV today. So the idea we have to kind of get out of our own kind of perspectives and really be open to the idea of how people are doing things differently these days. Cool, awesome. So we have
questions. Audience questions. Okay, I have one. Question is for Kris. Vizio, so I guess selfishly, my role at Brand Innovators is not just MC. I also put the chairs out.
you look great, you're really straight.
Thank you. Yeah, I really worked on the space in this year. But in all honesty, so our team and Rachel in the back there is on my team, and our job is to help marketers kind of navigate through the ecosystem of where they should be, paying attention to as far as technologies and helping them uncover the right partners. I'm very curious because obviously the connected world in Vizio, you have a lot of competition out there, but like, what's different? What's going on over the last year how are brands really interacting with you as a platform and as a partner? Because to me, I think that's something that's super interesting as really you're competing for the eyeballs that Freddie's talking about.
Yeah, I think we touched on it earlier. That's why I was so grateful to Freddie for pointing me in the direction of that kind of passive attention, which is, it's the home screen, it's that first device. It still looks like a TV, we still consume, the content still looks the same way, but how we get there has been so different. And so ad breaks are just overflowing with content, and a lot of people are getting out of linear cable and doubling down on live sports. Almost every brand that we talk to says that, right? Which just means that if you're in auto, I think there's the average NFL game has 32 auto commercials in it right now. So how do you get out of there? And finding ways to, again, what we were talking about earlier, is actually not interrupt, but actually maybe even provide a little utility to a viewer. And then what we were also talking about, we're all humans at the end of the day, so put on your human hat. And when you turn the TV on, like, I don't want to be interrupted with an ad first thing while I'm looking for something, but if you help me find something, we've curated a bunch of content. So right now we have a new sports zone. So NFL games are across the entire, there's 5 or 6 different apps, and finding them is a challenge. So putting them all into one place and having a brand show up in that space.
Yeah.
And again, it's, especially for the creative folks in the room, you think of it as a new canvas. It's not just a place for 15s and 30s anymore. It's a place to put more subtle messaging, not beyond, somewhere between a logo and a real 15 or a 30 is really adding some color and context to the brand experience, and using some of the ways that we have of getting the brand in there. That again, the consumer isn't really looking at it, and we're actually just coming out with some really exciting data of how, when you measure the impact of somebody having seen that logo in a passive way and then seeing a commercial, the overall metrics really go up in a way that neither one of them by themselves add up. So that for all the marketers, and it's a smart TV play overall. Vizio's operating system just happens to be a cut above. It's really intuitive and designed to help people find something. So that would be, I would say, thinking about ways to get on a home screen. And meet people before you go into the traditional ad breaks.
I guess you can also add, there's a bunch of apps that are not ad supported still, right? So you want to get to those people, you have to.
Yeah, that's Adam. My boss's line is it's the last gas station for 200 miles. So this is your last chance to actually make one of those very valuable impressions before they go into an ad-free environment.
Great. Well, let's give a hand for our panel. Thank you so much. Great.